Thanks everyone for joining us today on KRTD News. We got a couple of great stories for you today. There's some crazy stuff. So the first one we're going to look at is some crazy stuff going on at the Hill. Crystal and Sager are no longer there doing their show Rising. Um, Kyle got banned. There's some crazy stuff going on. So let's take a look at Kyle Kalinske talk a little bit about what happened there.
That's a sleazy, underhanded thing. Soon, right after they leave, you cut a promo for the host to say. I don't want to get anybody who I'm close to in trouble, but listen, this is all out there for you to see with your own two eyes. It's something that I realized and recognized, and so I'm going to talk about it because I think it's gross. So, as you all know, Crystal and Sagar just recently left the Hill. They're going independent. In my opinion, that's where they should have been all along. I mean, they always had the ability and the talent. You know, when you start something under the wing of a company, it could feel like you have more security. But, you know, if my dumbass could make it in this format, Crystal and Sagar obviously could make it in this format. So I'm very happy for them. Now, The Hill, which of course is the company where they did Rising, the corporation where they did their show Rising. The Hill YouTube channel pulled down Crystal and Sagar's farewell video after they left. So they only left it up for what, 2 days, 3 days, something like that, before they pulled it down. Now, I also happen to know that when Crystal and Sagar planned their exit, everything was relatively amicable, you could say, but they had everything organized and structured and ready to go, and there was a lot of thought and dedication that went into making some of these decisions. So they had the title for their video all set and ready to go. They had, you know, the order ready to go. So in other words, their exit video would be the first video of the day for that show, and it would be premiered. And of course, when a video is premiered, and when it's the first video, typically that video does very well. So they had their title ready, they had the video ready to premiere, and then behind the scenes, somebody decided, let's change the title to something incredibly vague that has no reference whatsoever about how Crystal and Sagar are leaving. The title was like, you know, Today on Rising or some shit. And they removed it from a premiere. Now, if I'm not mistaken, most of the time, if not every time they do a show, the first video is premiered. So they removed the video from premiere, made it a regular video, changed the title to something incredibly vague in general to make it sound like Crystal and Sagar weren't leaving. But it gets even worse. There were moments where they turned the comments off. And there were other moments where they turned the likes and dislikes off. So, listen, I don't know the specifics in terms of behind the scenes at corporate media, at The Hill, but there was obviously some sort of tug of war going on. And this doesn't take a genius to figure out. All you had to do was watch what was happening. Of course, I was watching every step of the way, and now, 2 days later, 3 days later, they pulled down their farewell video. So in other words, now they're trying to make it so if you tune into Rising and you see other hosts, you're like, okay, I don't know where Crystal and Sagar are. I guess they're just on vacation, taking a day off. Maybe they'll be back eventually. But I guess I should stay and watch the show. It's a very sleazy, underhanded attempt to try to dupe the audience into thinking that what just happened didn't really happen. But it gets even worse. They cut a brand new promo video for the show after Crystal and Sagar left. Now understand, Rising is Crystal and Sagar's baby. They came up with the idea. If they're leaving the Hill, the right thing for the Hill to do is very simple. The right thing for the Hill to do is to give them, you know, the send-off of royalty. Hey guys, we love you. Just so you know, you're irreplaceable. You built this amazing thing, this amazing show on this channel and made it what it is. It's never going to be the same without you. You know, here's a cake. We're going to miss you. And you know what? We're going to we're going to change the branding of the channel away from Rising with Crystal and Saga. We're not going to have Rising anymore. We're going to change the name of the show and have a new show because we can't replicate what you guys did. You guys are unique. You're special. You're your own thing. Nobody can fill your shoes. It's not possible. Instead, like I said, they tried to bury the fact that they left, change the title on the video, change it from a premiere to a regular video, turn the comments off and on, and then cut a fucking promo the day after they left. The promo trying to say like, hey, don't go anywhere. Please don't go anywhere, audience. Don't go anywhere. Don't be mad. We're one of the top news shows on YouTube, and that's never going to change. Never going to change. It was Crystal and Sagar who made it the #1 show on YouTube. Now they're not there. What do you mean that's never going to change? By the way, in the promo, they put a lot of people in the video who definitely don't want to be in that video. They put Shoe on Head, for example. They put Matt Taibbi. They put a number of anti-establishment voices in the promo as if those people signed off on the fact that, yeah, Crystal and Saga are leaving, but I want you to stick around and watch whatever the fuck else is going to, take the time slot at the Hill. Go talk to them. My guess is they wouldn't have that opinion. And by the way, they also threw in clowns like Madison Cawthorn in the video, which goes to show you that whoever's behind the scenes making the decisions now has no idea what the essence of the show Rising was. If you're putting Madison Cawthorn in the same video as Matt Taibbi and Shoe on Head, anti-establishment, you're not getting the gist of the show. You don't even understand the basics of the show. You don't get the framework of it. So, listen, that's a sleazy, underhanded thing. Soon, right after they leave, you cut a promo for the new show, which is the same label. That's gross. Now I'm in a position, since Crystal and Saga are out at the Hill, I'm in a position to tell you guys my experience in dealing.
That video there, we're gonna get to his experience in a moment, but Gary, I want to let you go ahead and react first. To what happened.
So I have a completely different take, and I like Kyle. I think when he sticks to real news, he has a valuable opinion. In this, he's completely off base. And based on his commentary, I have to wonder, is he speaking on behalf of his friends and this new effort, or has he never worked in corporate before? Because when you're working in production, either, just as a prime example that everyone will get, how many actors did we have playing Spider-Man? Do we scrap the movie because this Tobey Maguire couldn't play it? How many times did we have a Batman? I think he is completely off base here. And the fact that they didn't record a new promo and introduce the new host before Sagar and Crystal left, I think is amazing. That was as polite as you're possibly going to get it. So he is. I think this is very clickbaity what he's saying here, and this is a vapid take, and I wish Kyle wouldn't do this because it is such a turnoff about what is really going on. What the news story is here. I think he is actually diminishing the potential by going through this rant. This is ridiculous, absolutely ridiculous.
That's true, but they did pull down the video, which I thought was a little bit unethical.
So what? What was their contract, right? So
that's true, but they did put it back up.
Oh, okay. So they put it back up. They took it down. It's their right to do that. And that's anybody true. Who has had intellectual property, either graphic design, music, any of these things, your contract up front tells you who owns what when you leave. Right. So none of this is any surprise. And The Hill could have taken and wiped out every past episode that those two had ever done. Doesn't matter. And let's step back a little bit. All of us who are doing things from a leftist perspective, whether you're locally focused, state focused, nationally focused, none of us had the backing of a corporation to help uplift what we were doing, get our message out there the way that they did. So I'm not going to cry for these two. I applaud their effort. I like what they are doing, and I want to see them do more, but they started from a very high platform. So why are we taking time to cry about it now? I'm sorry. I'm over all of this, and I'd really rather get to the potential that they have now. Are they going to actually tackle some things that are a little more edgy than what they had before? So that's the conversation I think we need to have. I have, no patience for what a corporation did. So what? Move on.
That's true. Now, what they did with Crystal and Sagar may have been one thing, but what they did to they did some other stuff where they breached certain contracts and they breached personal agreements they had made. Let's take a look at video 2. Where they
So
talk a little bit
listen,
about
that's
that.
a sleazy, underhanded thing. Soon, right after they leave, you cut a promo for the new show, which is the same label. That's gross. Now I'm in a position, since Crystal and Sagar are out at the Hill, I'm in a position to tell you guys my experience in dealing. I have to tell you guys, I don't know how much of this I'm supposed to say.
Wait.
It was talk to them. My guess is they wouldn't have that opinion with corporate media behind the scenes. So Crystal and I, of course, we started the podcast, Crystal, Kyle, and Friends. And, you know, the idea behind it is very straightforward and very simple. I respect Crystal as an interviewer. I think she's phenomenal at it. I also respect the fact that she seemingly has created this lane for herself where she has one foot in the new media world and one foot in the official world, which sort of gives her access to a lot of very big name people in terms of interviewing. And so we got together. We decided to do a show. And, you know, in many ways, it's a match made in heaven. And, but there were pressures behind the scenes that you guys didn't know about. So Crystal had gotten permission to do Crystal, Kyle, and Friends, and we had gotten permission to put the podcasts on YouTube. And any of you who are paid subs to our Substack, you know, you pay $5 a month and you get the video on YouTube a day early. Everybody else gets access to the free audio a day later. But the first, was it the first or the first 2 or 3 or something, Crystal, Kyle, and Friends podcasts were free videos on YouTube. Well, even though Crystal had gotten permission to put it on YouTube, immediately after our premiere, the episode with Marianne Williamson, which did phenomenally well, by the way. I haven't checked the numbers now, but it's got to be over 300,000 views on that video. We were told that if we put the second episode on YouTube, there could be litigation. There was a lawsuit threatened. After Crystal had already gotten permission to put our show on YouTube, whoever's one of the higher-ups there took a look at the fact that we had a gigantic launch with over 300,000 views. And they did an about face and said, if you put that second video up there, there could be litigation. We might sue you. Now understand something. This is after I told an audience of hundreds of thousands of people who watched that inaugural episode. This is how it's going to work. Pay through the Substack, $5 a month. You get every video on YouTube. And then for people who don't pay, you get the audio version for free on any podcast platform. And you don't have to pay anything. It's just available. So after I told hundreds of thousands of people this is how it's going to work, there's a lawsuit threatened. If you put that second one up, we might come after you. Well, of course, panic sets in. And, you know, everybody's losing their mind. And I'm a man of my word. I told you guys it's going on YouTube. So guess what? It's going on YouTube. I'm not going to let some nameless, faceless corporate douchebag determine what happens on my channel when I've never even had a conversation with any of the higher-ups at the Hill.
Right. So with that, I think that's a little bit different. The Hill said, I don't think if there was something specific in Crystal's contract, I'm sure they would have let them know to begin with. Sagar does a podcast on YouTube called the Realignment Podcast, and he was doing that, and they never said anything to him. And that podcast goes up on YouTube in full episodes. And they never said he can't do a podcast, and they even let him talk about his podcast on The Hill Rising. When it came to Crystal, said, hey, you can't talk about your podcast here. But you can do it. And they actually told her you're not allowed to acknowledge the existence of it. And then they banned Kyle from ever coming back on Rising.
Sure, that's called a moonlighting clause, and most corporations have one.
Okay.
So again, it goes back to, has Kyle never worked for a corporate entity before?
Oh, never.
So of course he'd be shocked. But as a corporation, it's your play space. You can do this. And she signed the agreement and she cashed the check. So She was obviously okay with it. But here's where it got interesting for me. Um, you had somebody in the executive office telling one of their employees what they could and could not do. And Kyle said that's wrong. Shane, how do you feel about that?
Um, I definitely think there's something wrong with that, especially um, there definitely should not be. Well, it would also depend on Crystal's contract. I would actually have to say, you'd have to see what Crystal's contract says because you all. I think, to my knowledge, now the contracts are not public. So to my knowledge, they're very similar to Sager's contract. They had a very similar contract. I think that was mentioned once before. No, I don't know if there was a moonlighting clause in Crystal's, but there was not in Sager's because he did the realignment podcast every week or whatever that was.
Well, that's speculation. We don't know that for sure.
That's true. But yeah, that's definitely something to look at. But I think they definitely made the right choice in leaving the Hill. The Hill, and then after they left, the Hill went much further right, and they replaced Crystal Ball, to my knowledge, with Ryan Grimm, and they replaced Sager with someone named Emily something who's further right of him. So they just went much further to the right.
Sure, and that's to be expected. We've seen that when, the transformation and the new editorial staff at MSNBC. It happens across the board. But again, this is nobody should be surprised about any of this, particularly if you're a progressive or a left-leaning, or let's be honest, even if you're far, far right, if you're trying to broadcast on corporate channels. Did you think they were just going to hand it to you, or do you think maybe you need to either go under the radar, play ball, get your audience, and get out like these two have obviously done? I don't see any foul play here. I think that this is corporate acting like corporate has always done.
That's true. Now, if Crystal came out though and said, "Hey, my contract doesn't say anything about this," that would be a completely different story.
But she's the only one who's got standing, and if she decides that she wants to go through arbitration for that, fine. But it's not for me, and frankly, it's not for me or anyone else to do this. I think what is happening here, and this is maybe this is me being cynical, but this is Kyle doing clickbait.
That's probably.
And I don't like it. I don't want to see somebody who has been a very important voice lower themselves down to this mean girl argument. I'm uncomfortable with all of this.
That's true. Now let's go to the next slide while we. So now that Crystal and Sager are on their own, not to the next video, the next slide. Now that Crystal and Sager are on their own, they're no longer doing Rising, and now they're doing something called Breaking Points. How do you think that they're going to? Do you think they're going to be more successful? Do you think they're going to have some more challenges? Because I'm not really sure. They kind of just went out, and they're getting decent views, but.
Well, I think they're going to face the same challenges as everyone else who is trying to. It comes down to a business model, right? So you have your content, and then you have your business model. So they are starting from a very elevated position, and they've got a number of audience members. Even Kyle said on his particular broadcast, he struggled, but now he's making $13,000 a month. Who among us wouldn't be able to hire people and have the production value and all of that at $13,000 a month? That's crazy. So they're already starting from that high platform. So what I am looking for, number one, as a journalist, not as a pundit, not as a clickbait person, but as a journalist, is what are you putting behind a firewall? Because I feel very strongly about putting content behind a firewall and calling yourself a journalism. To me, you're not. It's entertainment. And if you're all about that and you want to get your money that way, go for it. Don't hate the player. But don't call yourself a journalist by putting things behind a firewall, because as a progressive leftist space, what you are doing is marginalizing and keeping content that should be worthwhile and free to everyone from the public space. And at the same time, we keep pushing for public funding of independent media. That is what a Patreon is public funding. So while other organizations are out here pushing for equal time and truth and all of these fact-based things, if my colleague is now relegated good content that people really need to know behind a paywall, then what am I supposed to say to the people who are facing evictions, unemployed, all of these things? They don't deserve it. So this is what I'm looking for. I'd like to see them keep their content. I'd like to see them tackle those tough stories that aren't being told on corporate-owned media. And I'd like to see them keep it in the public space at the same time. So those are my criticisms and critiques. I really like the work they do. I like the play that they have with each other. I think, me personally, I kind of side with Sagar on a lot of things because I'm looking at the fiscal responsibility within an MMT space, right? And that is something that I really want to see them pick up more. Let's really tackle from our perspective here in left journalism, the big lie that is forced austerity and the deficit myth and all of these things. If we are coordinated in that, and we can all come at it from different voices, different perspectives, but if we are all attacking that big lie, then absolutely everything else falls flat and we can actually move forward. So that's what I'm looking for from them.
Definitely, yeah. They've already done, to my knowledge, they put out about 3 videos. They've done pretty well in the 3 videos they put out, but a lot of their content is definitely behind a paywall.
Yeah, and that always makes me uncomfortable, the paywall.
The paywall makes it uncomfortable. Now, I don't mind as much what, if you have a free version. If you want to, like some shows will do, hey, if you're a member, you get an extra hour. Like that doesn't bother me as much as, hey, if you're a member, you get everything. And you get nothing if you're not a member. You need to give something. The thing is, they have nothing to lose by giving at least an audio version of their show to everybody. They have nothing to lose by that. There's still going to be those people who will give them $5 or $10 a month. They'll still exist. And you see that with Crystal and Kyle's podcast. They give the audio one for free, and there's hundreds and hundreds of people who will still pay for it if they want the video. You're not going to lose any money if you provide the audio for free, or if you do. I think the Jimmy Dore show does premium video, and then and premium audio. And they have like the rock bin, and you pay for that. And then there's different models you can try where you pay for an upgrade, where you don't have to pay for the full thing.
Yeah, and I still think that if you're putting good content out there, it's tip your bartender, tip your wait staff, right? Same kind of thing. And I think that Sagar and Crystal both said something in a prior announcement that I thought was very telling. They were saying that their production quality was such that they looked like corporate media, so therefore it was easy for them to have their content used in parts of conversation to get to either family or friends on the right, family or friends who are the vote blue no matter who. And I think that's a really important distinction because they're able to reach the spaces that, and let's be honest, and no offense to Jimmy Dore, I think he's wonderful. I love his gritty take on things, but when I mentioned to people about, well, hey, did you hear such and such? And Jimmy Dore said this, consistently over and over, I heard, who? Jimmy who?
Exactly.
And I think that we forget that when we are operating in this space and, we have the Kyles, we have the status quos and all of these, the majority of people, the majority particularly of the US population doesn't know who these people are. So if you have Crystal and Sagar who are able to get their content shared in that way, that's huge. That's huge. And I really don't want to see it behind a paywall. So I guess what I'm advocating for is if you are a Patreon subscriber, thank you. Keep doing it. And this is where that public funding comes in so that maybe they're not putting any content behind a paywall.
Well, absolutely. No, I get that with the production. That's one of the things I've been able to do. There are certain family members and certain friends I have who won't look at anything unless it looks to a certain standard. So if I've been able to show them a Rising video and say, hey, what do you think about this? And they'll actually take a look at it. And that's actually true for a lot of people, that you can actually share. That's something that you can share around. You can pass that off as corporate media. The other thing that people forget is Crystal used to be on MSNBC and Sagar used to be on another mainstream channel or something to that effect. So you can literally, people don't even notice the difference when you try to pass that off. I'm like, oh, okay, great. This looks like mainstream media. Oh, these are people from mainstream media. I don't know. People,
Well, yeah, it was the same thing where you had Cenk and Rachel Maddow coming from Air America. So, okay, let's. I'm one of those people. I'm a cynic, and it's probably because of my line of work.
of course,
I heard what they said. I want to see what they do, and I'll be
exactly.
watching. I'll be watching with interest to see what kind of stories they tackle.
Exactly. Yeah, let's take a look at them in the next. Everyone should definitely pay more attention to them in the next couple of weeks to see what happens because they had a big splash when they left. It may not stay like that. They may not be able to retain the audience, or they might get a bigger audience. You don't know what's going to happen with them
Right.
now, so should definitely pay attention. Let's go ahead and go to the next story. Um, do you want to go ahead and start with this one?
So this is okay. So New York, this one I really wanted to dig into the story because a lot of news agencies, including independent and left, are not talking about this, and this is huge. So I get that there are a lot of people have checked out of electoral politics. However, you're missing the point here. So, as part of the new laws that have gone through, one of the mandates was all of the states had to take the census data. So 2020 was a census year. For those of you who said, I'm not going to participate, my government's not going to count me, well, you just screwed yourself.
Mm,
And we saw this in the number of states that lost seats in the House. That's the people's house. It goes by the population and who is served. So we saw some of those seats shift from Democrat to Republican states, that type of thing. Well, the other side of this is the gerrymandering that occurs. This is, it's called redistricting, but we know it's gerrymandering. And part of this was every state had to have a citizens commission. Some have done it, some have not. Some of them you could put your name in. Others, like New York, they were appointed seats. So there were two seats that went to the Democrats, two that went to the Republicans, all of these things. And it was the guidelines for who was appointed was you couldn't be an elected official, couldn't be married to an elected official, couldn't be a lobbyist, but that doesn't mean that you couldn't be a party loyalist. And this is a favor owed. So what's going to happen now is all of these districts are going to be moved a little bit. We would hope that they would go to a fair mathematical presentation, but pay attention to what's going on. A lot of these efforts are going to be public, and in New York, it's not going to be online. You have to physically go to a community meeting, and they've got those posted, and I can share the link, but
mm,
you've got to go to one of these meetings across the state and put your voice in and hope that they hear it. And then when these maps come out, they will do a vote, and it has to be a supermajority vote to get these districts in line. I don't think that you're going to see a whole lot different in New York like you will in other states. New Mexico, it's going to a vote, and they're using mathematical computer equations. I'm kind of favoring New Mexico over New York. So
mm.
here's the other thing that's really important in this story. There is a ballot referendum on the 2021 election for New York, and this concerns the state changing the state's constitution so that the next commission doesn't have to have a supermajority. It can be a simple majority. Sounds great. Here's where the headline gets lost. There is a ballot referendum for all of New York to change the state's constitution. How the hell did that get there? And isn't that the same method that everyone in New York could use to, I don't know, end qualified immunity and all of the wrongs like minimum wage, raising the minimum wage in the state, all of the things that we fight for in this populist space? If they could do this to change the Constitution and you as a New York State citizen get to vote on this, wouldn't you like to do this in real time for other things? And I think that's part of the message of what's going on with this gerrymandering thing. If you're checking out of electoral politics, I get it. If you're unhappy with your representatives, I get it. But this is the stuff that really matters, and nobody else is covering it. And we need to, because this is the stuff that matters.
Definitely. That's something that could absolutely be used for other things, and people are not considering it. In addition to that, I'm in New York, and I've heard nothing about this. Nobody's talking about it anywhere. I have, I have the cable package, so I have the New York cable channel, and they haven't mentioned it one time.
Right. Well, I will say on Hair of the Dog, we've talked about it twice. We have 2 1-hour specials on it, which thank you, KRTD, for syndicating our show. But
Of
this
course.
is what we've talked about, particularly when it's ending qualified immunity. So in a city like New York, a state like New York, where you have taxpayers who are funding wrongful death and civil rights violations of your police departments, and you have the Fraternal Order of Police who is openly rebelling against your state's governor, why wouldn't you use this? Why wouldn't you talk about gerrymandering? Why? I mean, and there was even talk during AOC's last election bid that they were going to try and redistrict to get her out of office completely. So you would think that people might remember this and have a little bit more of a uh, I don't know, memory for what is actually going on and what actually matters. And
Exactly.
this is it.
I actually wasn't aware that they were actually trying to get AOC out with redistricting. That's an interesting thing
Oh, yeah,
that they
there's a
actually
number of
consider
seats
that.
like that. Hmm.
They can do it to AOC. They could literally target all the progressives in Congress, and they could try to redistrict them and use gerrymandering to get them out of there.
Quite frankly, it happens all the time. Yeah, you see it state after state after state. And what these parties are doing is trying to make sure that their district is, left leaning, right leaning, all of these sorts of things. Here's the problem: mathematically, statistically, we do have 46 to 52% of voters who have checked out of both parties. Where does that leave you? So if you're going by just the data of the last few cycles, you're going to get it wrong. But that's exactly what partisanship will do. So if you are in New York or you're in any state, this is going on across all of the nation. Pay attention, get involved. A lot of these meetings are being hosted real time on Zoom and on other platforms. Sometimes you might actually have to go to a physical meeting, but you can look this up in your state. And in New York, they've got a redistricting website that's got a full list of where these meetings are going to take place, how you can join in, how you can get involved, and you need to be the watchdog of
Hmm.
what's going on here.
So for everybody watching, where can they find this redistricting website, and where can they participate in these meetings?
I can post a link in the chat.
Yeah,
It's a
definitely.
long one.
Put it in the chat for
It's a
everybody.
very long one. So, yeah. And then the other part of this is the census. The census really feeds into so much, and this is part of the funding model. So, when you as a state need help with certain projects, I don't know, like COVID, they go to the census maps. So, if you're not participating in the census, all of this definitely trickles down, and it just causes more issues. So Ballotopedia is a really good resource, and I'll post that link um, in the chat so viewers can see it. And then the other piece with the New York portion of the meetings, this is also going to be in there too. And this was covered by AP News, but of course nobody in any of the cable networks picked it up.
Of course
So
not.
both of those links are in the YouTube chat right now.
Great. No, it's very possible don't pick it up, or they'll do something. I've seen them do this a million times. They'll gloss over a story. They
Hmm.
will mention it in passing, like, "Oh, when there's redistricting going on, da 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 da." Anyway, let's get to the next story.
Yeah, and I think for me personally, I get frustrated because again, there's a statewide ballot initiative to change your constitution. All that was required to make that happen was just a few signatures. People of New York, go to Central Park with a clipboard, and you can get qualified immunity on the statewide ballot and have everybody decide. That way, you're not waiting for Congress members. You're not waiting for your state house. You're not trying to go through the political machine. It is the people. And when we finally learn what power we actually have, it's going to change everything. So I think really that is the thrust of this particular story. You have so much power and so much influence if you would but just pay attention a little bit. And I think, again, it's our responsibility as journalists to get this information out there.
Definitely. And for everybody who doesn't like the New York City government, I have good news. They're all being replaced this term at the end of this year.
Good job. Congratulations. Hopefully, better people come in. So,
Let's hope so. All right, let's go ahead and take a look at. There's something going on with some Zyklon gas. So the state of Arizona is reopening its gas chamber and preparing to use Zyklon B to execute death row inmates. And this would be according to documents published by The Guardian on Friday. So, Carrie, what do you think?
here's another one where I think they buried the lead. So, okay. So first off, when you look at the story first blush, they went with the clickbait, the Zyklon B gas. What the real story here is, number one, let's talk about the fiscal nature of it and the errors that we make in a dual justice system that incorrectly convict people all the time. If you don't have the money for a good defense, chances are you're going to face charges, end up in jail. Not to say that everyone in jail is innocent. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is we clearly have a dual justice system. And with this, we have execution of people that we have later come to find out were completely innocent. So here you have the state of Arizona being tough on crime when in fact they're actually wasting money, because the way the law works in every state is you have to have a number of appeals. Those are expensive. It's far more expensive to execute an inmate than it is for a life sentence, right? So, and let's be honest, Arizona is the famous for free and cheap labor through their prison population. So why would they ever do this? This is a flex. But the real story here is they went with the clickbait of the Zyklon B gas. But on the back side of it, they're talking about this is a gas that originated in Nazi Germany and used during the Holocaust. I have two words: Operation Paperclip. Does anybody know what that is? We took all of those same Nazi scientists, brought them here to the US to develop the same weapons. And oh, by the way, the billions that we just sent to Israel, where do you think some of those bombs come from? That is the next traditional wave of some of those things. And Andy and I did a story 2 weeks ago talking about what's going on in Gaza and the munitions that they're using, those bunker busters. Those are coming from Nazi Germany scientists, their foundational work, through Russian scientists and others to use these munitions that are being dropped on citizens that suck the air out of everything. And it kills people slowly, horrifically. So why are we talking about Zyklon B gas and Nazis and not tying it into real-time efforts right now being used against a civilian population? My take on this story is it was written for, and this is an unpopular take, it is written for the low information, low thinking American audience who is very prone to the clickbait and isn't into critical thinking, can't tie these things together. And this again is where we need to do a better job as journalists to tie these pieces together so that people can put the pieces together and not be fooled again. Now I sound like I'm quoting music.
Definitely. So the World Socialist website, this is where this one comes from. So they have some good stories, but they a lot of the time they'll miss the ball on some stuff and they'll miss some connections. They won't. They basically they gear their stories towards the casual reader, someone who's going to just read this in glance and say, "Oh, that's awful," and move on with their day.
True, and I don't fault people. Like I say it all the time, people are just trying to survive at this point. So you're right. Who is this particular story for? And based on the World Socialist website, I would expect better from them because they usually do a nice deep dive. It's another publication like the Jacobin, where they really do dig into it sometimes. I'm not sure what happened with this one, if they just had a deadline, but I think they could have gone another step here. And I don't know, maybe we forgot our history in this one, but whew, yeah. So there's a couple different layers to this one. You've got Arizona, you've got free slave labor of our prison population, and of course Arizona is trying to flex all the time by doing something absolutely crazy and just horrific. So not surprised. It could have said Texas on this headline, and I would have been surprised either. So, yeah.
No, but I don't even think the other part of the story I don't think they're covering is I'm not sure if it's even legal to use that gas in the U.S.
Yes, it is.
Oh, it is?
It is legal to use this in the United States. In fact, is one of the chemicals when we have international treaties and we talk about not using biological weapons and chemical weapons on population, we carve it out in the treaties, except for in the case of insurrectionist activities or unrest. This is why you can use a chemical weapon against your population who is, I don't know, protesting for Black Lives Matter. That's a chemical weapon, and we can use that on our population because that's a carve out of international treaties. So Zyklon B is also one of those crowd control kind of munitions that's carved out in international treaties. So yeah, you can absolutely kill people with it. You shouldn't. But it's another form of capital punishment right now. Injections, the chemicals that we use for injections, same thing. Can't use any of those chemicals in warfare, but you can on your own civilian population.
It's definitely awful. This is one of the things that civilized society shouldn't do, and that we do. We continually. Although that's my mistake for considering the U.S. a civilized society in a lot of ways.
Well, there's a and I just want to call out to the chat right now. Mike, he's one of our longtime viewers of our morning show, and he says, "Don't forget the Zyklon B was made by IG Farben, one of the major members of Bayer. So Bayer Chemical, you take their aspirin, right? So good point. Good shout out, Mike. So yeah, we are not the saints that we like to portray ourselves as. And I think that that's what this story actually alludes to. You just follow it down the line, and we are not the people that we claim to be.
Exactly. Everybody's like, well, the U.S. is one of the most civilized, the most perfect, utopia, the American dream, and all this stuff. None of that
No,
really exists.
the person who says that has never been outside the U.S. borders.
Exactly.
So that's a clear indication, right? They've
The person
never
who says
traveled.
that usually has a salary over $300,000 a year, too.
Could be, very well could be. Yeah, absolutely. So
no, we're definitely not a civilized society. Civilized society wouldn't execute people anymore, and we definitely wouldn't use Zyklon B gas to do it.
right, right. Yeah.
And there's definitely that tie to Israel that you mentioned. So.
Oh, yeah. That's totally okay to kill people in Gaza with the same origin story for these chemicals. And like I said, when every time you see a tear gas canister lobbed at tax-paying American citizens, that is a chemical weapon being used against our own people. Why are we okay with that?
I don't know if it was Bernie or who said this, but someone mentioned that some of the Holocaust survivors would be definitely not okay with what the Israeli government is doing in Gaza right now. Horrified at some of the stuff because they went through some of the same exact things.
Well, I think most Americans who got here went through the same things, right? So I'm not in any way diminishing the Holocaust, in no way.
Well, no, I'm saying a lot of the people who went through the Holocaust would be horrified at what the Israeli government right now is doing in Gaza.
Sure, but my family went through genocide too. That's how I got here, and
Absolutely.
I learned early on.
The Israeli government as well.
Right. Well, I learned early on genocide's bad. So this is why I personally push back on it, because my family taught me better. So it's not anti-Semitic to fight for human rights in any way, shape, or form. So absolutely.
The other thing they'll do is say, like they'll say to me, because I'm Jewish, they'll say, oh, well, you're a bad Jew because you think what Israel is doing is wrong. I'm like, no, I support human rights.
Yeah, it's always the argument to shut down. It's a binary thing, and that shuts down all pushback. If you're not with the Israeli government and the Zionists, then you're not with Israel at all, and that's not true. And I think, getting back to this particular article where it highlighted the origins of this particular chemical going back to Nazi scientists, they were really trying to play on that a little bit, and I think it was kind of a cheap shot. So
definitely.
Yeah, exactly. So we have a little bit of time. You want to get to Tom Perez?
Sure. If we could bring that slide back, let's do that, and let's get to Tom Perez. Hey, let's put
So
up a card. We're gonna be right back, and we'll try to bring that back.
yeah, so the
Okay.
okay.
So, in regards to, you want to go ahead and start with Tom Perez.
Yeah, because the chat is popping off.
All right, we got that. Let's bring up the
Yeah.
yes. All right, let's go ahead and start with Tom Perez.
Okay, cool. Thank you so much. Yeah, we were just rolling through the stories today. This Tom Perez story, this is another one where age and treachery come to play here. So people who won't know or didn't realize Tom's long history of being slimy were totally shocked by the headline that he came and went to a legal firm that is proudly sabotaging union efforts. Well, if you remember who he was, where he came from, and his neoliberal roots, this is not a shocker to anyone. And one of the headlines I thought was just brilliant, absolutely brilliant, was there was a GOP article that kind of, you hate to go with the GOP and say they were right, but broken clock and all of that. They were talking about his roots and how awful he was then. So they were talking about the number of times that he had misrepresented his skill set. He had misrepresented his career. He had done things that were contrary to even the Democratic platform pre 2016. So here was a guy that they were calling out as an opportunist who was just trying to get paid. And he had been through the revolving door several different times. So I liken him to the Rahm Emanuels and all the other people that the Clinton cabal surrounded themselves with, outright neoliberals trying to get what they were trying to get. So these were the people that were hanging out with the Reagans and all of this. They're all one big club. And this is where he comes from. So the Tom Perez thing I just thought was beautiful, because those of us in 2015 who saw the play for the DNC chairmanship, and we saw what happened with the Hillary camp, who pulled the democratically elected shenanigans to get Perez in there. Not at all surprised. Not at all surprised. So, Jane, you're a lot younger than I am. I'm seeing this from age and experience. What is your take on Tom Perez here?
So my take on Tom Perez is very simple. He went up against. I would. I normally go back a little further on Tom Perez. As far as I know him, initially was when he ran for the DNC chair against Keith Ellison. I know most about him during that race, where Keith Ellison looked like he was going to take that race. He was the more progressive leftist candidate in that race. Not necessarily a perfect candidate, but much better than Tom Perez. No candidate is ever perfect, but I saw that race and I saw how Obama did the same. Obama got into the middle of that race and he convinced Tom Perez to run. He endorsed Tom Perez, and he made sure that Tom Perez became the DNC chair by a couple of votes too. He campaigned hard for him, and he made sure that Keith Ellison would never be the chair. I think he was the vice chair, to my knowledge, but they wanted to keep him out of that chairman seat, or he had some kind of position within the DNC.
He had a committee lead that I recall. And this is where I really want to drive that point home, when we were just talking about redistricting and gerrymandering and how to do a ballot referendum. Read the rules. You cannot win the game if you don't read the rules. And so for everybody who is a Dem inter proponent, or somebody who's running as a Dem that may be elected, you're a PC, read the rules, because that is what got Perez in the chairman seat. Not only that, but the platform committee and everything that happened thereafter. I was at a DNC meeting in Chicago and watched them use the rules to take all the progressive policy and shift it completely. I was there and I watched Nina Turner, who was speaking passionately about a bunch of different issues and begging them to do something. And they said yes on one side and then use the rules to reverse it once again. And this was on the climate change for debates. You had the Sunrise Movement and their supporters in the DNC trying to get that put on the platform and put into the debate schedule. And you had Tom Perez and other people who were giving platitudes and saying, yes, we're there with you, we feel you. And then they used the rules to reverse it. So I mean, you can't play Monopoly. You can't play WoW. You can't play any of these things if you don't know the rules and succeed. So this is no different.
Of course, and the other thing you have to remember is they don't like Keith. Keith Ellison was never going to be allowed to hold that seat. They were, if it wasn't Tom Perez, Obama or Clinton's would have found somebody else to run against Keith Ellison. It didn't have to be Tom Perez. If Tom Perez said, no, I'm not doing it, they could find another anti-union neoliberal to do it. No problem.
Sure, but it comes down to the votes, right? And this is where progressives in particular in the Dem interspace really need to learn how to play the game, because we've seen it time and time again in other state Democratic parties, where if you're doing the politicking and you're building those relationships and you're actually doing things behind the scenes before it comes to a vote, because an election is always decided before the votes are cast. If you're doing that hard work on the ground, then it's already in your pocket. And we've seen it many, many times where somebody thought that they were unchallenged and it was a shoo-in, but because people were doing the very hard work, networking and making their case behind the scenes, the time that vote came, it went completely different and it was a total upset. So this is the game that we really need to pay attention to. Again, read the rules. The bylaws are there. They're posted. You can read them for yourself. You can, if you're an elected member or if you're a member of the Democratic Party, you can show up at the rules committee, because what's happening right now is it's being done behind the scenes, particularly during COVID. And we reported on this extensively, that all of the rules were given over to one or two people by unanimous vote. And this was from the delegates. The delegate selection process gave it to just one or two people, these neoliberal Clintonites, to rewrite the rules. Has anybody bothered to read them now? Don't you think you should, particularly when we have candidates rising right now running as Democrats? And if you're a progressive, do you want to keep losing, or do you want to actually do something meaningful? So we need to, I know that it's sexy and it's so much fun to fawn after congressional candidates. I get it, but they need your help on the ground in the less broadcast spaces, like the committee meetings, the county meetings, the state meetings. You need to be there. You need to show up and read the damn rules. It's pretty simple.
Exactly. And for those of you who are surprised by this, you weren't really paying attention to who Tom Perez actually is. I saw some reactions on Twitter like, oh my God, I can't believe Tom Perez joins an anti-union law firm.
Yeah, what's not to believe? He's consistent.
Exactly.
He's absolutely consistent. And so I think this is something that we need to look at critically, particularly as, you know, like I said, we have candidates rising and then we have a primary election coming up. I'm working on a story right now about the primary election and calling back to Steny Hoyer and Mama Bear on national TV, talking about they own the primary and they have every right to rig it. That's, well, number one, that's admission of a crime. Two, no, none of that's true. You as a taxpayer own it. You pay for it. So these are all these things that we need to do a better job as progressives, or we're going to keep getting creamed. So I have full empathy for the people who are checked out, said that electoral politics doesn't work. And it's a little frustrating for me because I know how easy it is to flip your county and flip your state. One of my good friends who just passed away from COVID, Joseph Trina, he was one
Mhm.
of those people. He showed up to his county meeting, him and 5 people, and they challenged Georgia, who is so corrupt, right? And that vote blue no matter who, when it's a little bit red. Um, he was able to do it with just a small group of folks who read the bylaws and were able to challenge power using the written bylaws. You saw it again with Warren up in Massachusetts. Warren flipped his entire county, and now he's flipping other counties who are trying to be just like his because he read the rules and he showed up. So for those of you who aren't doing it, maybe blue isn't your color. Maybe you want to go to the libertarians or the greens or the socialists or whatever party you have available to you. It's a matter of just showing up. Really, it is that simple.
Exactly. There are plenty of independent parties in New York. The other thing to look at in New York, we also have a really strong. Well, we used to have. They used to be really strong. The Working Families Party used to be a lot stronger, but they're another one to look at. They give ballot lines to who they think is the progressive. You could influence, if you work with them, you could influence who you think the progressive Democrat is in a race, and you could be part of that decision. Hey, who deserves this ballot line?
Hmm.
Who's the real progressive? Because a lot of the times they will endorse people who are not actually progressive. You could be part of
Well,
that decision if you work with them too.
right, and that's exactly right. And it's part of that co-opting. None of these tools and tricks are new. They're effective because we as progressives aren't getting hip to it, or this is where I get a little frustrated having been in this and seen all the tricks. Um, the younger folks don't want to listen. So it becomes a little frustrating because I see time and time again, you get a Tom Perez as somebody who's there simply to co-opt and to stall the effort all the time. And when you've seen it enough, you can recognize who that person is right away. But the enthusiasm is always there, or the inexperience kind of carries the day. So I think we need to do a much better job of talking to each other, listening to each other, and making sure that the leadership that we have, not only in political parties, but in movements, is actually about the right message, about the right deal, not in it just for themselves, not in it for getting cash, but honestly, we always talk about believe the science. We've got what, 7.5, 8 years left. Um, I've lived my life. Shane, are you trying to go 8 more years? You know what I mean? So would you like to see 35?
Yeah,
If that's right, if that's true, then maybe we should work together a little bit more, right? I'm winking at 50. I could check out now. I'd be okay.
exactly. And in regards to climate, the Green Party has actually done pretty well in California in 2020 because they had a lot of active members, and they got about 38 Greens. It was 38 Greens elected in California because people actually showed up to the polls for them. They were active in those meetings, and they were able to influence the vote. They got a couple of mayors and council people elected.
Hmm. Well, full disclosure, I am a state counselor for the Green Party because number one, I showed up. But here in this state, where you have 6 parties on the ballot at any given time, minor parties, all of that sort of thing. All right, here we go.
Definitely. Oh, I see. Oz in the chat from Roar Media. Thanks for joining us, Oz. I didn't notice you there before. Just noticed you was in the chat. Wanted to give him a shout out.
Yeah, definitely. Hey, Oz. But yeah, this is an example here where and I keep saying it over and over like a broken record. Uh, all the progressive policy, with the exception of Medicare for all, has been enacted here in New Mexico. And all of these minor parties don't have a majority. They're not doing it. What they're doing is forcing the other two well-funded parties to do the right thing. And that matters. So we've also got to stop making the excuses and pulling out the Democratic propaganda that says Greens don't get elected. And I got to tell you, that's bullshit. I pushed back on the Vanguard last week on that. I was like, why are you doing the Democrats' dirty work for them? Over 1,400 Greens have been elected nationwide at all levels. 1,400.
Mm-hmm.
That's a lot. And these are people who, with blood, sweat, and tears, would be, a little put out by, say, all of us on the center and the left saying that they can't get elected. It's complete and utter bullshit. And this is why show up, read the rules, do what you got to do, because unless you guys are climate science deniers too, and I'm not aware of it, time is running out. It's absolutely running out.
Exactly. And then the other thing is people think it's either or. They say, oh, you can't vote for a progressive Democrat in one race and a Green in another and independent in another. You can vote for whoever the most progressive candidate in multiple races. Whoever you feel is the right candidate, you can absolutely support a progressive Democrat for city council, and then a Green candidate for U.S. Senate, and an independent for uh, public advocate, or whatever you want to do. It doesn't have to be either or.
Right. You get to have that conversation about policy and character, not about color. Right. So that's where we should be. That's where we should be aiming for. And for all of the folks who are checking out, please, please reconsider, because we need you in this. We need you in this. It can't be just everybody talking about it. You actually got to do it. And, just for the sci-fi fans, I'm constantly put back in the position of, there was a movie, and I don't even know if I can mention her if you're going to get a copyright thing on it, but there was a movie where a group of space cowboys were out doing their thing, and they stumbled upon a corporate issue where they had released a chemical, and this chemical caused half the population to be super aggressive and violent, and the other half to be so complacent that they laid down and died, literally laid down and died. And I keep reflecting on that particular movie because I see that here, and with a group of our population who's been manipulated into sedition and all of these horrific acts that when they sat and thought about it probably wouldn't be doing that. And then the other half, and I see this as the left, are so complacent that they are literally laying down and dying. When it comes to, doing something simple like getting out to vote, they don't do it. When it comes to something simple like supporting independent media, they won't do it. When it comes to something simple like signing a referendum for qualified immunity to be ended, or to protect LGBT rights, or to have assisted suicide protected, legalize marijuana, expunged records, all of these things we say we want, they can't even get up to sign a petition or to pass a petition. And I think it's so frustrating from my perspective, because there's only so much I can do as a journalist. It's my job to bring out these issues to you and hope that I've given you enough information that you will take action. But I don't see that happening.
Absolutely. Um, we gotta end it here. We're a little bit over. Everybody check out KRTD News next Friday with Madeline Hoffman, and then Kara, you have your show on Monday, right?
Yeah, Hair of the Dog airs Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 10 a.m. Eastern. And next week on Friday, bookmark that. I'm telling you, bookmark the Friday show. Even if you miss Monday and Wednesday, you'll be forgiven a little bit. You want to be involved in our Friday show. It's going to be amazing. We have a legendary guest coming in, and I'm fangirling already over it. So yeah.
You want to give a hint, or should everybody just?
No, I'm not giving you a hint. I'm not giving you a hint. Okay, one small hint. It's funky. That's all I'm going to say.
Sorry, repeat that.
It said it's funky.
Okay. I think I have a guess, but I'm not going to say anything. Everybody tune in for that. Thanks everybody for tuning in today. Bye everyone.